The winter sun barely pierced the gray skies over Germania Inferior, yet the cold was a presence, biting through the woolen tunics of the 18th Legion. Marcus Valerius, Centurion of the 4th Cohort, stood rigid, his bronze-crested helmet a stark silhouette against the timber stockade of Fort Drusus. Miss Scutum, the massive curved shield, rested beside him. Its once pristine red face now scarred and stained with mud, blood, and the memory of 100 skirmishes. It was the stain, however, the dark, congealed patch near the boss, that truly held his attention, a stain not of battle, but of moral compromise. 3 days ago, during a brutal push to secure the river crossing, the stain had been freshly made. The fighting had been desperate, the barbarians fighting with a furious, primal rage that often unnerved even the most veteran Roman soldiers. Marcus had led the charge, his voice a raw, bellowing command that cut through the chaos, driving his men forward with precise, merciless efficiency. He lived by the discipline of militaries, swift action, unyielding loyalty, and the absolute elimination of threat. But in the heat of the clash, a young, newly recruited mile soldier named Flavius had broken rank. Flavius, barely 20 summers old, was overwhelmed by panic, dropping his shield and stumbling into the path of a German warrior. The German, seeing an easy kill, had raised his axe high, his face contorted in a triumphant snarl. Marcus, positioned slightly ahead, saw the inevitable tragedy unfolding in slow motion, a direct threat to the legion's formation. He could not turn back to save Flavius. Doing so would have created a gap in the line, inviting a disastrous counterattack. Discipline dictated that the legion's survival always outweighed the life of a single weak soldier. But Flavius was staring at him, his eyes wide with a plea that transcended the noise of war, a plea for his commander, his protector, to intervene. Marcus hesitated a fraction of a second, but enough for the young man's fate to be sealed by his superiors in action. The axe descended, not striking Flavius, but landing on the head of another soldier. Lucius, who had instinctively covered the fleeing miles. Lucius died instantly, his body collapsing against Marcus's shield, splattering the dark, irreversible stain upon the red paint. Flavius, shocked into action by the sight, scrambled past the falling bodies and rejoined the rank, his panic replaced by a frozen, guilty terror. The line held. The river crossing was secured. The victory was written down in the cohort scrolls as a success. Marcus was praised for his constantia, his unshakable resolution under pressure. Yet the praise felt like a burning lie, heavier than his helmet, colder than the German wind. He had saved the line, yes, but he had implicitly chosen to let Lucius sacrifice himself for a coward. Now, 3 days later, the 4th cohort was preparing for the long march back to the main fortress, their objective complete. The Centurion stood watching the men strike camp, the orderly chaos a balm to his military soul. Flavius was among them, meticulously rolling his tent canvas, avoiding eye contact with any man who passed by. The unspoken knowledge of what happened was a shared secret, a silent cancer eating at the cohort's trust. The men knew Flavius had been a coward. They knew Lucius had died for him. They knew Marcus had seen it all. A centurion's authority rests not just on his strength, but on his moral standing among his men. If the men believed their leader valued tactical perfection over justice, the entire foundation of the legion would crack. Marcus walked toward the young soldier, his heavy hobnailed boots crunching on the frozen earth. The approach of the Centurion was always an event, a palpable shift in the atmosphere of the camp. Flavius flinched, dropping the corner of his tent fabric, his face paling to the color of the pale winter sky. Flavius Marcus's voice was a low rumble, devoid of anger, which somehow made it more terrifying.
"I see Centurion,"
the soldier stammered, dropping into a deep, shaking bow of respect. "The tents are packed well," Marcus observed, his eyes scanning the bundled canvas, not the man. "Yes, Centurion." "Everything is according to standard procedure, Centurion." "Standard procedure," Marcus echoed, finally meeting the young man's terrified gaze. "Discipline demands standard procedure." Flavius knew this was not about the tent. His hands were trembling, betraying his guilt. Marcus then pointed with his iron-tipped vine staff, the vitus, toward the scutum resting on the ground. "Tell me, Miles, do you see that mark?" he asked, his voice still unnervingly calm. Flavius had to look, his gaze drawn magnetically to the dried, dark patch on the shield. "I see it, Centurion," The stain. From the crossing, that stain, Marcus continued, is the blood of Lucius. It will not wash out, not with all the water in the Rhine. The centurion knelt, a gesture that brought his authority down to the level of the guilty soldier. Lucius died because he valued the line above his own life. He also died protecting a comrade. He paused, letting the implication hang heavy in the cold air. You lived, Flavius, because I chose the survival of the legion over the execution of a runaway. Flavius collapsed onto his knees, silent tears freezing instantly on his cheeks. I am sorry, Centurion. I was afraid. Fear is not a weakness, Flavius. It is a reality, Marcus stated, his voice softening slightly. But your fear caused a moment of chaos. It cost us a good man. And my scutum bears the proof. The young soldier looked up, seeing the weary pain beneath the centurion's severe military bearing. Centurion, I beg you, grant me the fustuarium. Let me face the punishment I deserve, Flavius pleaded, referencing the brutal execution for desertion. Marcus struck the earth with his vitus, the sound a sharp crack that echoed the finality of a death sentence. No, the legion needs every spear, even the shaky ones. We do not waste resources, Flavius. You will not face the rod. You will not face the axe. You will face only your shame. He stood up, towering over the kneeling soldier once more. The command had returned to his voice. Your punishment is this. You will now carry Lucius's shield. Its weight will be yours, and its memory yours. Furthermore, you will be assigned to my personal detail for the march back. You will walk immediately behind me. Every step of the long road, you will see this stain on my scutum. You will remember. Flavius pushed himself up, wiping the tears with the back of his mud-caked hand. I understand, Centurion. No, you do not understand yet, Marcus corrected him. You will learn the meaning of true discipline. Discipline is not the absence of fear. It is the courage to stand fast, even when you wish to run. Marcus then called over the tesserarius, the officer in charge of daily logistics. Ensure Flavius receives Lucius's gear, and that he is provisioned for the march. The tesserarius, who had been silently observing, nodded curtly, his expression grim but respectful. The centurion turned away, leaving Flavius alone with the realization of the strange, heavy penance imposed upon him. It was a burden far heavier than a swift execution. It was a life sentence of accountability. Later that morning, the legions formed up, the sound of the cornu horn signaling the beginning of the long journey. Marcus marched at the head of his cohort, his gaze fixed straight ahead, an impenetrable wall of authority. Just behind him, close enough to feel the heat radiating off the centurion's segmented armor, walked Flavius. Flavius carried his own pack, but on his shoulder was the scarred, heavy scutum of the man who died for him. And every time Marcus adjusted his own shield, the movement revealed the dark, unholy stain near the bronze boss. Flavius saw it again and again, the visible proof of his momentary lapse, and the constant reminder of his debt. He did not look like a coward now. He looked like a man carrying the weight of 2 lives. The centurion knew this was the only way to heal the cohort. Punishment was necessary, but it had to be constructive. The men had seen Flavius's breakdown. Now they must see his grueling public redemption. The act of carrying the dead man's shield transformed the coward into a living memorial. The other soldiers watched, not with contempt, but with a new, complex respect for both the centurion and the young soldier. They respected Marcus for not executing the boy, but for finding a punishment that reinforced the very core of legionary duty. And they respected Flavius for accepting the penance that was clearly destroying his soul. Marcus continued his march, the wind whipping the fringe of his helmet's crest. The physical march was nothing compared to the march of his own conscience. He had made the cold, hard choice, that day a choice that served the greater good of Rome. But the price was the stain, the eternal reminder that saving the legion required sacrificing his personal integrity. The stain was not just Lucius's blood. It was the mark of a centurion who chose duty over mercy. He had saved the line, but he had lost a small piece of himself in the process. The long columns snaked across the bleak German plains, a river of iron and red marching toward the south. Every centurion of Rome carries this unseen burden, the responsibility of being the bronze edge that holds the world together. Marcus touched the rim of his shield, feeling the rough texture of the dried stain beneath his glove. He knew he would never truly scrub it clean, just as he could never fully erase the memory of Flavius's pleading eyes. He was a perfect soldier, but now a flawed man, forever bound to the shame of his subordinate. The Roman Empire was built on such stains, unnecessary evils performed in the name of order and conquest. The moral of the story was etched into the steel. The greatest sacrifices of war are often made by the living, not the dead. He heard the faint, steady breath of Flavius behind him, the sound of a redeemed soul struggling under a deserved weight. And for the first time since the crossing, Marcus felt a different kind of resolution, the quiet, grim determination to see this redemption through. The burden of the stain was now shared, a testament to the harsh, unyielding justice of the Roman legions. The long march had begun. The stain was his and Rome's forever. This tale explores the true cost of discipline of militaries on a centurion's soul.
Ow.
Like, share, and subscribe to Storycraft Studio.